or you look at resilience as not a continuum but a contiguum. Why? Because you feel what you do in terms of resilience is that we put in elements wherein the system can itself adapt to the changes, that any disaster brings. Because if a system breaks during a disaster, that system had certain issues and certain gaps. So those gaps have to be filled while we are looking at resilience per se. So basically we will talk about these two things: risk sensitive planning and how we bring in urban resilience because of this. So what we will do is we will look at the urbanization and the risks. What we are saying is that we are a society which is urbanizing very fast. So we will look at the risks that an urbanizing society creates. We will also look at development as we understand. How, what do we understand by development? So, and how does that, are we going in for development initiatives that enhance the risks, or are we going in for or are we doing going in for development initiatives that reduce the risk? So we will have to see that. And urban planning and risk mitigation for sustainable cities, because now we are talking about the SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals. So it is not only the cities that will be that will be built according to what we feel like, but it also has to be sustainable. We will talk about it. And the urban risk reduction framework, if we go in for urban risk, if we are accepting that there is something called urban risk, so how do we look at urban risk? So therefore, let's look at very quickly. We are already very late, and we don't need to really look at the data that I will be present, but actually concentrate on the inferences from that data. So the trends of urbanization globally and in India very quickly, and the urban riskscape that it is creating, the process of urbanization. So we know that at 20th century, this is all data. We know that, we know all this, but it is also good to look at the information that or look at the inferences that we can draw from the trends, or the data that is given to us. So basically we are talking about a world that is urbanizing very quickly, you see. So, and especially the 20th century has seen the fastest ever urbanization. Now, what is urbanization? Urbanization is a process of transformation. So, when an area becomes, uh, transforms from a rural into an urban. Now, why are we talking urban? Because normally, in the present scenario, in our world, we see that most of the centers of activities are somehow urban. You see, urban centers become centers of power, centers of trade, centers of economic activity, centers of cultural activity, centers of education, centers of administrative centers. So you kind of, all the activities somehow get concentrated in cities and towns. So by urban we mean the cities and the towns, and we see that the growth of population has been very rapid and very fast. So therefore, let's not go into the details of the population and all that. But what we need to understand is that from 2007-8 onwards, more people in the world live in urban areas than in rural areas. So therefore, our concentration therefore goes from rural to urban, though that is not the case yet with India. But we will also, with the way we are also urbanizing, we will also have this kind of, scenario very soon. So now, what is also understood is that 5 billion people in another 10 years, 5 billion people will be urban, And urban population, why we are also very concerned about this is that Asia and Africa will be the most I would say the recipient of the maximum increase in urban population. And it is also said that China and Nigeria, these are the three countries which will have the maximum growth of urban population. So therefore, when we look at how the world, the population has increased over the world, you see the developed countries who we talk about, they have had a roughly, they have been very urbanized from early on, and they have kind of, had a kind of a plateau kind of a growth, where sorry, the urban population growth was not too high over time, so it went on a very stable kind of a growth level. But you see that the entire, what we need to remember from this slide is that the urban population of the world, that is the graph pointers marked in red, that entire population was pushed up. Now, this increase is basically pushed up by the developing countries. Now, what does this show? What do we infer from there? I mean, it's okay. Otherwise, data, unless we infer something, is just about, it's okay. So what? You might try to say that. But what we need to understand is that when we say that the global population has been pushed up by developing countries, we mean that the developing countries may not, I'm not saying they don't, but may not have the kind of urban development framework which would, which would actually see to a very, a proper way of urbanization. By proper way of urbanization, though it is not very, very politically correct, what I'm trying to say is that if the urban growth is very fast and very high, so what happens is you cannot pace your growth. So and therefore there are a lot of these unplanned developments, ad hoc settlements which are not, which don't conform to your uh, engineering standards or even physical planning, spatial planning standards. So if there are too many people who come into an urban area at one go, so what do you do as engineers? Can you provide absolutely fabulous, very, very strong buildings? Yes, that you should provide. That is your duty to everybody. No, but that will take time. So what happens is, and not all constructions are therefore very formal. There are informal constructions wherein the professionals are not called at all, because shelter is one of the primary necessities. So obviously people build wherever they can, they settle wherever they can, they build with whatever they can lay their access to. And therefore, and what has been also proved is that the growth of urban population has been mostly due to migration. And so if they're migrating, it is mostly a distress migration. So how will they then contribute to the to a very uh, uh, very systematic growth of cities? They don't. So therefore, when we say that developing countries have pushed up the urbanization of the world, we what we mean is that this influx of people to urban areas, to any of the cities, across the developing world, has created more problems in terms of the risks, in terms of disasters when we talk about. So again, that is one of the main things that we have spoken about. We won't spend much time on this. What we see is how the urbanization trends have grown, and what we see is that Asia, North America, the Latin American countries, and Europe have already had a very high rate of urbanization, and they have kind of kept growing on a more stable scale. But the continents of Africa and Asia have really, especially if you look at Asia, you find that the rate of urbanization has really shot up. So therefore, and by 2050 it is expected to shoot up even more. So from 2000 onwards, the rate has gone up, has exponentially gone up. So therefore, what we understand, we don't need to look at the data just for the sake of looking at data. What we need to understand is that the inferences that the data can give us. The inference is that Asia is urbanizing very, very rapidly, and we will have a lot many people residing or trying to reside in urban areas. And as urban development professionals, as municipal engineers, as professionals from the civil engineering, we need to be very, very aware and also committed towards providing a safe development to all these people who are coming in. Now, how that becomes an issue basically. So when we look at the world, the 10 largest cities in terms of the built up area, the the development as we like to call them. So when we look at the built up area, we find that Tokyo, Yokohama is the largest urban conurbation in this world, the largest, it's entirely urban. So it is a huge space, a huge city created, or a couple of cities created over, it's an agglomeration which is created over space, followed by Jakarta, followed by Delhi, Manila, Seoul, Mumbai, Shanghai. I mean, the built up area is large, so they are largest cities, having a lot of having covered a lot of space. But when we talk of the density, you see the persons per kilometer square, that those same cities, if you take, those same 10 cities that we have taken, which stand in the first 10 cities of the world in terms of built up area, when we talk of density, none of these cities, Mumbai kind of stands up. And because I was dealing with 10 cities, the 13th city, that is Dhaka, actually is number one in terms of density. So you see, then immediately when you look at the things from at urbanization or the urban areas or the cities from a density point of view, from a disaster point of view, you need to look at the density, and your entire picture changes. Then Tokyo, Yokohama, and other cities don't come into your consideration at all. Because, and it is imperative for us that we look at these cities where there are too many people trying to make a living, trying to reside in a small area, a small parcel of land. It is there that the challenge of disaster management, challenge of giving these people in Mumbai perhaps a safe life, safety from disasters, a good quality of life, a good building stock, is what is important, isn't it? So therefore, if we look at the world, it's a very different matter altogether. We know what we need to take is that yes, Asia and Africa are going to be the next, urban concentrations all over the world. They are going to see the rapidest urbanization. But then, what do we understand from there? That yes, we are going to have many more people in cities and towns than we have now, and the number is going to increase. That is something that we need to keep in mind. And second is that our cities, the larger cities, are very dense in terms of population. So there are too many people living in, I don't know whether I should use the word too many, but many more people living in unit area than maybe other cities of the world. So that is the challenge as civil engineers or as building professionals. So sorry. So now the world population we have seen is going to grow, the urban population will grow, and at a much higher pace, and the rural population is going to come down. Now, what happens in India is something that kind of is is the same as that happens all over the world. Though we feel that, look, our urbanization is not even 40%. So, I mean, what are you talking about? Because most of India still lives in villages. Yes, it does. It does. So as per 2011, we have 31.2, which I think it's estimated to about risen to about 38, 39% right now, urban population. So basically, about 61% of the 1.2 billion people, they live in rural areas. So we can say that, okay, we don't have much to be bothered about. But then why we need to be bothered about is because by 2025, that's just 5 years down the line, more than 50% of the country's population would be urban. And second is, even if we look at the uh, census data, 31.2. Let's not go into the estimated 38%, but the 31, even if we take 31.2%, that was there, say, 9 years back. What we see is that the absolute numbers, it may not be a high proportion, but given India's population, the absolute numbers are huge. So we have to cater for 377 million people, and that is by far, more population than even some of the countries. So just our urban population. So the absolute number being so much, we have to cater to, as development professionals, we have to cater to all these people who are there. The 377 million, now it is going, has maybe gone up to 400 million. And catering to the 400 million people, to the providing them with the components of a good quality of life is a huge challenge for us. So these are the two things that we need to remember from what we have discussed till now, that in 5 years, in another 5 years, we are expected to be more than half of our country, of our population is expected to be residing in urban areas, and the absolute number is very, very high. So when we look at these urbanization trends, it's perfectly all right. We see how it has increased over time, where we see that the population that has increased in million, and the number of towns and cities. So the growth, the growth of the towns and cities, or the settlements, that is the physical settlements, has been far less than than how the population has shot up, really. So therefore, that is important. Now, this is very interesting in the sense that when we talk of from the context of risk, urban risks. So I have taken two census figures, 2001 at the beginning of the century, and the 11 one. So we'll probably have another census in another 2 years time. Not next year as we should have, but maybe in 2 years time we'll have the next census. Now you see, when we talk of the statutory towns, that is the towns which are already declared to be towns and cities and urban per statute, uh, we have increased from about, the number of towns and cities have increased from about 3,800 to 4,000. So about, you see, 200 to 50 towns. We have increased in 10 years. Yeah, the number, that is. But I would like to draw your attention to something called the census towns. Right. So these census towns have increased from just 1,300 to nearly 4,000, 3,894, in a span of 10 years. Now, what does this tell us from the concept or from the view of risk? That the census towns are those that are in the process of transformation. So if we remember that we have two main, we in India, we classify our towns and cities from two main broad areas. So these broad areas are the demography, and the governance. So whether when we fill up or when we identify, when we talk of the demographic conditions, you know the census, that there has to be a population of 5,000 plus and a density. So it has basically the demographic indicators have three components. One is the population, the absolute number, the density, and the what we call the workforce participation, right? So the 75% of the working population needs to be employed in non-primary sector activities, that is non-agricultural activities. So this is what the demographic component is. And the governance component is that there should be a ULB, for settlement to be termed urban. Now, where the census towns become very important from the risk scape, the landscape of risk, is that these towns fulfill the demographic criteria, but they may not fulfill, one or two of the demographic criteria, but they don't fulfill the governance criteria. So that means what? That these towns are in the process of development. The governance, they don't have a local governance system in terms of a ULB or an urban local body. Meaning what? Meaning thereby that your zoning regulations, your bylaws, etc., are not applicable in census towns, which are applicable in your statutory towns. So these towns are just short of being called towns. They look like towns. There are, the density is high, and people are working in maybe in the main towns. All this is there. But the problem is that you cannot apply your zoning regulations. That is, you cannot have a regulatory framework that is important for your further development, and to reduce and to see to it that the town develops without risk or with minimal risk. So most probably what happens is, in the next census, these towns get get classified as statutory towns, and then the process will start to have the ULB and the regulatory mechanism. But then by then, once so it gets transformed maybe to a municipality from or a nagar panchayat, or maybe a corporation if it has grown too rapidly. So what happens is, by the time this happens, and that the municipal government can apply the zoning regulations, the town is already up and running. You see, so it is established, and your the built up area is entirely developed with entirely, or I would say primarily developed without any kind of zoning regulations. The hierarchy of roads and streets are not there, because when the town, while it was being developed, there was no regulatory mechanism. So once it gets, if it does, maybe another 5 years or a time after that, if it does get uh, uh, classified as a statutory town, then come the regulatory mechanisms, which is of no use. And then when the infrastructure, urban infrastructure, needs to come in, so for the sewerage system needs to come in, the water supply needs to come in. But where do you do that? Where do you take your pipelines from? Because the town has grown organically already. So your FAR is not maintained. It is actually become a crucible of risk in that case. So you don't even know where to take your water and the sewer lines from, and so your public health, health infrastructure gets a hit. You don't know how to develop the stormwater drainage system. Because there are no setbacks, because it was that those mechanisms were not in place when the town actually came up, when the town actually evolved. So therefore, and we don't know how how to put in the stormwater drainage. I mean, with all the manuals and everything that we have in this country, it's just not possible. So the town, so you see the risk scape of the town increases in the sense that because there is no place to have a stormwater drainage system and etc etc, we don't have the town gets waterlogged every monsoon because there is no hierarchy of roads. The roads are thin and all that are narrow. You can't get in your fire engine in case of a fire. So your risk scenario is increasing by leaps and bounds. So for every census town, you have the lack of a regulatory mechanism is your risk increases, and by the time we kind of wake up to it, it is normally uh, later than what we would like it to be. So then it becomes then the question of just making do or working within the system, or what in very popular but not very nice way of putting it, it comes in, that is the jugaad kuch to kar le types and all that. So basically, and we see that while the other towns, the other statutory ones have not grown to the extent, the maximum growth has been in this sector. So therefore the risk has also grown from a risk concept. The other thing that we need to understand is that in the towns and cities, the larger towns, the metropolitan cities are, yes, hello, yeah, uh, so 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 maybe when we'll continue. So what we need to understand are the issues that we have in the Indian urbanization scenario, and how they are giving rise to the risks that we are talking about. So we are basically talking about disasters and risks in an urban context, so that we can do something about. I think some others have to keep their mouths mics.
Yes, ma'am, it is done now.
Yeah. So what we see is that you have a very top heavy growth, that is the larger cities are getting larger, so more and more people are pouring into the larger cities, and while the smaller cities, so we don't have a very uniform kind of a growth of the urban scenario. So what we'd say is that the growth is very very asymmetrical, and everybody wants to go into the the largest city, or the largest city that is possible. But the next tier cities, or maybe the cities of tier 4 and 5, 3, 4, 5, they're just stagnating. So therefore what we need to see is that we have in India, we have a very very top heavy growth with, and what does that actually denote? It actually denotes a huge amount of demand in terms of housing, in terms of facilities, in terms of schools, in terms of livelihoods. So, and when there is so much of demand with uh, supply that is limited, you obviously go in for kind of making do with whatever is available. So therefore what we see is that the housing stock of India, of most of the Indian cities, are have a lot to meet, a lot to do in terms of the safety part of it, or the construction uh, standards. So most of the houses, or many of the houses in urban areas, are informal housing, and especially in slums, without any consideration for structural safety or structural stability. So now these are the things, these are the houses which will be of maximum, cause of the maximum loss of life, assets, infrastructure, when in case of a disaster, because these are houses which are kind of an ammunition for, they have become killing machines,
అసలు
because
కొనేవాళ్ళు ఉంటే దాంట్లో దానిలో మళ్ళీ వస్తే పెట్టియచ్చు కానీ
sorry, yeah. So basically we are talking of two things. One is that a very top heavy growth and also asymmetrical growth. So it is not as if that the growth of urban population is getting very nicely and uniformly spread over our urban landscape. It is being, being spread very, very, disparately, in the sense that it is mostly being, directed at the uh, metropolitan cities. So therefore, so what is happening is it's a kind of a vicious circle. If the top cities are are contributing to so much of economic input, economic output, and the GDP, so obviously they act as, attractions, or they act as magnets for other population also to come in. So therefore, what is happening is it's a kind of a vicious circle that we are currently facing, and we need to somehow, break this cycle, and look at, a more uniform development of our urban society. So basically, there is so obviously what it does is, it leads to inequity and social and environmental imbalances. The urban ecology, urban green spaces, it has a huge amount of, influence on urban green spaces. So we have kind of failed to, you know uh, provide the basic services, and in terms of good housing, in terms of good infrastructure, and safe livelihoods to a large number of our poor. So there is a huge level of inequity that arises. So when we talk of a rapid urban growth, what are the risks that they have created is basically what I've tried to, establish through my earlier slides, is that there is a huge amount of unplanned and unregulated urban growth. So, and it exposes a very large population which are already vulnerable, because they may be first generation migrants, or part of the urban poor, who are exposed to risks of very complex nature. Now, what we should understand also is that an urban earthquake, maybe, or any urban disaster, will have a very complex consequences. So it will not be, a one disaster that an earthquake has struck. It will be a cascading, a cycle of cascading disasters, cascading hazards. So one, and then there will be another one. Like what happened in Kobe earthquake was in 95, was that the, of course, people, it killed about 6,500 people. So what happens is uh, the earthquake happens, then there is a bursting of your service connectors, and they may be fired after that. So all these things, they create a lot of cascading effects, and when we plan, we need to plan together for that. So if there is a flood, a pandemic can come, an epidemic of cholera or waterborne diseases can be there. If there is a flood, the chance of snake bites become very, common in many of the catchment floods. In an urban flooding situation, which is more of a, waterlogging and a drainage stagnation scenario, we normally face problems uh, of epidemics. In terms of, we've seen how the epidemic of leptospirosis during Mumbai floods, that was one of the huge dangers that came up. So and another thing that happens is hazards of moderate nature can create catastrophic proportions disasters, because even a moderate earthquake will create a huge disaster in urban areas. Why? Because there is a question of density. It will affect a huge number of people, because there is such high density that is there in that particular city. So a lot of people in a small area, so you see the impact is great. Again, another thing is that when we have seen the kind of urbanization process that we have seen, that we have undergone, is that it is rapid, it is not really systematic. So the city develops before the infrastructure comes in. So all this will, so obviously there is no regulatory mechanism. In the absence of any regulatory mechanism, you have very vulnerable building stock or even infrastructure. So when you talk of a very vulnerable building stock, informal as well as an informal buildings, maybe residential, maybe commercial, whatever. So immediately what happens is, whatever level of protection, uh, uh, a building constructed with all due diligence and following all the norms, the kind of protection that it should be giving, when it is the other way around, because of the informality of the system that is there, and the kind of pressure that the system takes. So even if it is a moderate hazard, there will be much more failure of building stock compared to other cities where the building stock has been systematically built. So hazards of moderate nature can create very catastrophic disasters in urban areas, and and we have seen various examples all across the world as to how disasters of various hues have devastated cities and economies. And developed countries are also, it is not only the developing countries or emerging economies that like ours that have that face these kind of disasters. The developed countries are not also immune to any of these disasters, but it is just that we seem to be because of our what we have done earlier, it we seem to be not very well prepared for all this. So risks of such disasters are definitely higher in many of the developing countries. So when we talk of urban vulnerabilities and risks, what we are looking at in India is, you may be aware of this particular map when you see the earthquake zones of India, and so we have four zones, with the darkest zone being the most earthquake prone, and you have so the entire northeast, parts of North Bihar and parts of Uttarakhand, Himachal, and of course the Kutch region of Gujarat. They are zone 5, which is a very high risk with high intensity earthquakes, and much more frequent than other areas, followed by zone 4, 3, and 2. So therefore, and when we put in or when we overlay the city locations, the larger cities, if we overlay the city locations with on these earthquake or the seismic zones, then it becomes a huge, we see where we stand really. So, so when we look at where we are. So you see, the national capital of our country is in a very earthquake prone area, and it's in zone 4. And given the quality of building stock in most of these areas, I think it is very easy to understand the kind of risks that we are facing in terms of disasters. Because if there is if the cities along the Gangetic Plain, or along less in the south, but along the northern Gangetic Plain, and also the west. Uh, I mean, most of our big cities are extremely vulnerable to seismic hazards in that case. So what we have done is we've just kind of put in the locations, overlaying the locations of the larger cities, that is with population exceeding 500,000. And you see where we are. I mean, which of the larger cities in India are really risk free, except maybe a few down south. So therefore, and even then, there are local faults which may get activated in any time, because local faults are those which are not really considered in this particular map. But then for those you have to go in for seismic macrozonation of cities, and then see what kind of maps or what kind of risks that they come up with. So when we were, as a part of the school exercise, we were looking at the city of Kochi, and we found that Kochi has 3 seismic zones, from moderate to low. Where here, Kochi is in zone 3, which is a moderate risk. So therefore, we need to actually go in for any of these cities into a much greater detail. Excuse me. To identify the kind of risk that a city can have, and given the quality of housing stock and the quality of infrastructure in most of the cities, it is easy to imagine what kind scenario will happen in case any of the um, a disaster strike in a city. So when we look at urban risk factors, so we have to understand the location in the hazard maps, like I've shown uh, last this one. So you can do the same for a flood prone area, or for cyclone prone area, and similarly we understand the multi hazard risks that a city may have in terms of you know, uh, multiple disasters really. So basically, we are talking of location of towns and hazard maps. We need to understand our risks in those terms. So whether the city is vulnerable to seismic risks, to flood risk, to cyclonic or a landslide zone, which is very common in our cities. So we need to understand that. We also need to understand what is the type of construction. So even if a city is in zone 3, say, which is of a moderate risk, we need to understand that what are the types of constructions there, because we need to also understand that Ahmedabad, which faced such a lot of damage in earthquake 2001, is in zone 3. So what we need to see is how far the how the earthquake waves will travel, and also what are the kind of and how they will impact or affect the constructions that are there. The level of human development, the poverty, it has been proved that poverty is something, or the level of or the migration status, or the livelihood status, whether the livelihood is a permanent or a very informal livelihood. All these are parts of, or are factors that increase the vulnerability of the population. So now the risk has to be always placed in the context of the people who face that risk, isn't it? So therefore, it is not only the types of constructions, of course, those are vulnerable or not, but also in terms of human development, in terms of poverty, in terms of education, in terms of health standards also. A population that is, generally malnourished will not be able to to live up, or to cope with maybe another disaster, which actually, like we spoke of, the cascading risks. So it may be difficult. Then the kind of infrastructure that is there. Do we have the kind of infrastructure to respond to anything that happens? So, or do we have the kind of infrastructure that kind of aggravates the risk? That is where we need to, put our cities in. I mean, that is the context that we need to put our cities. And of course, there is the criminal and the urban governance factors that also have it kind of stretches the administration or the administrative mechanism to so that the identification and the preparedness and mitigation for risks becomes very, very tough. So that is one aspect that we need to, these are the types of risks and the vulnerabilities, the vulnerabilities that need to be taken into account when we look at urban risk factors. So you have these urban flooding areas. Now, urban flooding is considered to be a factor of man-made. It's considered to be a man-made disaster, unlike the catchment flooding where the river floods itself. So, why do you think urban flooding is considered to be a man-made disaster? Because it is the conditions of flooding or the cause and effect factor, scenario in urban floods is very different from the normal riverine or the catchment floods. It is the urban floods are a factor of unplanned growth, the dam discharge, the more and more concretization of the subjects of the surfaces. So all these things, so once there is more concretization, it is more built up, there is less of infiltration and a faster runoff. So therefore, you see the pictures of four major cities in India: Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, and Kolkata. So in terms of location and in terms of other indicators or components, there may be a lot of difference between these four cities. But in terms of urban flooding, it actually it boils down to one factor, that is one large factor, that is planning and urban development, which has not been sensitive to the risk, which has not considered whether the natural drainage of the city is being obstructed or not while we are looking at the development patterns. If we are looking at developing a colony, whether we are preparing or we are creating a built up space which acts as an obstruction to the natural drainage of the city. So therefore, these are aspects that we need to consider, and therein comes our understanding of the development and the disaster paradigm. Now, you see, this is from a research study which had been done some time back on how in the seven cities of the country, seven major cities of the country, there was. I'll finish in 5 minutes. I think I'm running out of time. In built-up areas, we see how there has been a change in built-up area. And you see the kind of percentage from 91 to 2011 over 20 years. So here you see the percentage of built-up area has gone up, and you see in 173% in terms in Ahmedabad, and similar percent in Mumbai and Bangalore. So Bengaluru has been one of the worst affected in terms of urban flooding also, precisely because its built-up area has gone up. And you see how the land use, when you look at the land use and the land cover map between Ahmedabad and Delhi, in these 3 decades, how how we have gone on building our cities and have contributed to the urban risk scenario. So and all the cities across all the primary and the major cities across the country, we have just gone on building up without realizing that in the process we are creating risks. So this is something that we as individuals, as I mean, all this is a result of this. So we have the Mumbai floods where Ola is running a boat service, and of course the other areas, Gurgaon and Mumbai. wherein the extreme rainfall events or the average ambient temperature. So all these things are kind of connected to how we take our development decisions, and therefore create the risks that are there. Now, this is a part of the Mumbai, airport, wherein if you see here, the runways were, if you can see my cursor, the runways were the length of the runways were increased, and when the river came in between, the river was made to made to change its course, or just take and this is your terminal building of Mumbai airport. So when you make a river change its course through uh, through just a couple of culverts, not very well thought out, but just a couple of culverts, and you make and you create the runway. So during the floods, this entire area was the worst affected. So basically, that is where the development there is. It should not, and I bring to the table that this is not a kind of indictment or a kind of blame game of to the person who took the decision. The point is that when we take certain decisions for development, we don't really think of the implications on the risk aspect of it, because we don't consider the flood or a seasonal or a yearly event very normal to be thought about. But what we don't also realize that the loss that we incur affects each one of us as a nation. So therefore, when we look at planning in urban areas, we need to look at a very risk sensitive approach, and you would have heard of the global goals, of which there is one goal which talks of sustainable cities and communities, and it talks of certain targets that we need to do. Now, it is very important to understand that the disaster management paradigm or the sustainable development paradigm or the urban development paradigm does not actually talk of stopping or halting the development. It doesn't. It talks of a risk sensitive development. So you provide housing, basic services, you upgrade slums, but then look at the risk and look at and design it so that it will be sustainable, and it will not face risks. So you have to protect and reduce the deaths and losses caused by disasters. So when we're talking of sustainable cities and communities, in the same target, the world, this is the global goals, the world is looking at reducing the deaths and losses caused by disasters and the adverse per capita environmental impact. So therefore, what I'm trying to actually submit to the esteemed house is that we don't need to stop the development. We need to be very, very aware of the risks that we face, and we need to act so that whatever our development initiatives are or imperatives are, we need to act so that the risk is minimized to the extent possible, and not really become a huge it doesn't really aggravate to. So when you're providing housing, when you're providing basic services, we should look at how the existing risks need to be minimized, and not really look at uh, you know uh, uh, a very swanky kind of a housing system, or a very swanky office system which actually fails to work or fails to protect during a disaster. So there are many of these emergence of the planning aspects that we need to consider. I won't go into the details, but what we should understand is that the idea is that what I'm creating today or what I'm designing today, whether it is a single unit at the building level or at the neighborhood level, the colony level, or at the city level, what we need to understand is that whatever we are designing should actually be aimed towards looking or at minimizing the risk that may develop. And we also need to take into account the future the preempting of the future risks or the future climate risks that we would be facing, and as far as the scientific theory goes. And even now, while we are in the midst of a pandemic, we also need to look at how cities, and we have seen that this particular pandemic perhaps has impacted cities much more than the hinterland. So we also need to look at and very critically explore possibilities of making the cities safe from such events as well. So basically, we were talking of assessment as to how we understand our risks and look at the assessment pattern. So I shall stop here, and I hope I have been able to, I have really run out of time, and with my apologies. So I have tried to give you an overview of the urban risks and urban how development may give rise to a lot of risk, and you know uh, in terms of disasters. So, and how we need to actually understand disasters in an urban context, so that our we can actually do what we are required to do, and stop the disasters that happen. So, and given that our disasters, or the way we are looking at disasters and are changing over time, we need to look at the preventive, or the preventive aspect of it, the preparedness aspect of it, as well as the response aspect of it. That how do we respond to a disaster, and in order to respond to a disaster, how do we actually minimize the risk? The minimum risk, it is easier for us. So it's always better to plan according to the risks that are there. So thank you very much. I'll end my presentation with this.
Thank you very much, madam, for the very informative lecture during this pandemic only.
Yes.
Ma'am, actually, I just need to know your views regarding this pandemic only. That how, as a person, we can make ourselves safe, because now everything is open, and in our city, particularly in Indore also, daily around 451, 420, this much amount of patients are coming.
You see, the thing is that it is very difficult right now, because there is so less of information and tested information. We have a lot of, we are in not only in a pandemic, we are in a pandemic of information. So many information is coming from so many different sides. We don't know what to do. But what I would say is that we always say that disaster management is everybody's business. Right. And every single person is a stakeholder in disaster management, in reducing, and has a very important role in reducing disaster risks. So it is the same for pandemic. The more prepared you are, the more careful you are regarding the personal hygiene, regarding the protective masks and the gears, regarding your behavioral pattern. You see, so the safer you are. So it is not like every disaster we say that everybody has to take responsibility, so that we talk of something called a culture of prevention. It's a culture, like everybody does it. ये बिल्कुल जैसे कहते हैं, it is ingrained within us. So this also needs to be the kind of safety behavior that is there, the behavioral patterns and all that needs to be ingrained within all of us, because we cannot actually wish away the density pattern, you see. So, and there are many decisions which kind of become counterproductive. Like Ahmedabad mein kya hua tha, they tried to open the shops, vegetable mandis and all, for a short period of time, and there was a huge rush at that point of time, kyunki they had tried to save the shopkeepers from getting exposed and the shoppers from getting exposed, but it became counterproductive, which later on they had to, they corrected it. So there are 2 or 3 things that you need to do. One is that you need to be, you know, forever vigilant about your own safety. And once you are safe yourself, you can then look at other people's safety as well. So the sense of safety, the civic sense, civic consciousness of safety, of public hygiene, of public health, you know, the behavioral pattern of not spitting on the open, you know, the behavioral pattern of not really, performing any kind of bodily ablutions in the open. So these are things which needs to be, uh, things like, uh, I mean, what we do as a nation in terms of treating open spaces as our personal toilet. So that those are, behavioral patterns that need to change. So in effect, it is the same thing as disaster management. You have to, you are as much a stakeholder as the government is. So every action has to be very responsibly taken, and that is the only way one can save oneself and also one's loved ones. Thank you.
Any questions from participant side? Or you can mail us. We will send the response of madam.
Yes, that we can do. No issues.
Yeah. So, thank you very much, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Pleasure was mine, and
Yeah.
I apologize
Uh,
once again for
no
the
problem. It's an honor
early.
for us that you have given a lecture, and we need your support next time also.
Sure, absolutely, sure.
Yeah.
Nothing, absolutely. I really enjoyed being here. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot, ma'am. So we will start our session within 10 minutes interval.